Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the ninth episode of the Angular Spring Boot course. Today we're going to take a look at Angular components. To be more specific, we're going to explore the basics of an Angular component, and as you progress through this course, we'll add more knowledge on top of that, and we will be able to better understand them. But for now, we'll just focus on the basics. Now, before we get started, I'd like to remind you that you can always subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more software development courses that will sharpen your programming skills. Back to components. Let's start with the beginning. So, what is an Angular component? Well, to put it simply, an Angular component is a logical, structure that controls a part of the screen. So if you look at your typical web application, for example, the navigation can be a component. If you have a list of customers, then each row in that table can be a component, and the table itself could be another component. So in Angular, everything is a component. Now, these components, they encapsulate views, logic, and styles. So you have everything just bundled up inside this logical structure. So how the component should render as the view, or the HTML template. How is the component, what's the component's logic, how can you interact with it as the logic part or the TypeScript part, and how should the component look, and that's the style part. And the view, logic, and style are specific to each and every component. So each component is basically an encapsulated piece of functionality. Also, every Angular app has at least one view, or one component to be more specific. So in our case, when you create a new Angular application, that's component, not view, is the app component, and that's the root component of your application. But no matter how you call it, you can call it app, you can call it root, you can call it main, it doesn't really matter. Each Angular application is to have at least one component. You really can't build Angular applications without them. And just to help you get a mental picture of things, in Angular, your entire application is just a giant component tree. So you start off from the root, and that root has some parents, and those has some children, and those children have other children, and so on and so forth. Your entire application is a big list of components, a big tree of components. Even when you have, a navigation menu, and you navigate from one page to another, those results that you see are still components embedded inside other components. So I think this is a pretty important thing to remember, that in Angular, components basically are the norm. So just keep this in mind, okay? If you remember that in an Angular application, everything is a component, then you'll have a better mental picture of how an Angular application should look like. Okay, but enough of the talk. So let's create our first basic component and actually see how these things really look. Just fire it up IntelliJ, and we'll take a quick look at our Noteit-ng application. Now, by default, like I told you, we have one component already defined, which is the app component. And if you look at it, we can see it's made up of, we have the view, we have the style, the CSS, we have the logic, and we also have the spec.ts, which is actually a file in which we can write unit tests for our component. So basically, each time you create a new component using the Angular CLI or IntelliJ IDEA, you'll get these 4 files. Also, please take a look at the naming structure. So we have app component, as a logical name, and then we have app.component.ts for the component logic, app.component.html for the view, app.component.css for the style, and app.component.spec.ts for the test. Okay, so 4 files. You can probably skip the test in the beginning, because we'll not cover tests so much in this course, not in the first edition anyway. So let's look at them. So let's take a look at the Angular component TS. Now, this is how we normally write an Angular component. So we have, it's just a standard TypeScript class, okay? Its name is Angular component, and it just has one property, a string actually, note named noted-ng-app. Now we need to export this class because we need to make it visible to the outside world. If you don't export it, we cannot use it in other places in your application. Now we also have this annotation. So it's not enough just to come here, declare a class in order for it to be a component. You actually need to create an annotation, that component, and this annotation has a few properties of its own. So for example, the selector, app root. So each time we want to inject our component into another component, we can use this selector. Now, for example, if you take a look at the index.html file, which should be somewhere around here, okay, you can see that in the body of this HTML document, we have created app root. So this is the selector for the app component, is named app root, and here, in this HTML page, you basically, told Angular, hey, render this component, in this, body element. And then inside, app component, we can have other components and so on and so forth. But this is what the selector does. It allows you to insert your component into some other component. Then we have, like I told you, component has logic, and the logic is written inside the TypeScript class, so here. But the component also has a view, so a template, and we can reference that template using the template URL notation. And our template is app-component.html, and we have to search in the current folder. So app-component.html. And then we can provide a list of style files for this component. In our case, we just have, so it's a list because we have an array here, and also the name says style URLs, so it can be one or many, or none for that matter. And we have declared that this component, has its own styles written inside the app component.css, which is this class. Now, we have no styles defined here, but should we want to make this component, render in some particular way, we can, come in here. Now, all the styles of one component are not visible from other components, so they are unique to the components at hand. And if you take a look at the HTML, it's the standard. Let's open up a window just to know exactly what you're looking for. Localhost 4200. Welcome to noted-ng-app. It's a logo, and we have free links. So you can see the title here. Welcome to ng-app. We have the logo, and then we have a list with free icons. Now, this component also uses, one-way data binding by referencing the title property. So when we look in here, we have welcome to noted-ng-app. And so where is that coming from? Well, it's coming from the title property that we defined on the app component TS class. So if you go here, we have a title property, and it has a value equal to noted-ng-app. So when we actually design the view of this component, by using double brackets, we can create one-way bindings between our view, our template, and our component, our logic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete, pretty much everything in here, because I want us to start creating our own components. Okay, so we do not need the default template. We'll start from an empty app component, and we'll, continue from here. The first component that we're going to create in this application is the navigation component. So the top upper bar that contains the application logo and two links, notes, and feedback that will, contain the two views that you want to have in your application. Okay, so how would we do that? Let's fire up IntelliJ again. We are going to create the navigation component inside our root component, which is the app component. Okay, so I'm going to right click, new, Angular schematic, and we will generate the code for an Angular component. So here we have, component, directive, guard, interface, pipe, service, all the things that you can generate with the Angular CLI. and I will choose, okay, generate a component. It's going to be called navigation. Okay, and now the CLI will basically create me a new navigation component, and of course we have the navigation component logic, navigation component view, navigation component CSS, the spec file for unit tests, and one important thing, we also have an update in our app module.ts. Basically, we have imported the navigation component here, and we have also declared this component in the app module. So now we can use it throughout this module. You can also create components using the Angular CLI using the ng-new command, but then you have to, I think you have to manually register them. Now, I kind of like to use IntelliJ because it generates all the needed files, and also it makes this registration for me. So I kind of prefer IntelliJ, but if you want, you can go, vanilla Angular CLI. It's the same thing. The output is the same because IntelliJ uses the Angular CLI behind the scenes. Okay, so we have a component. It's registered. Okay, cool. I will delete the spec class because you will not be writing any tests. And now, okay, I have this navigation component. It already has a structure, so the selector is going to be called app navigation. The template URL, it's a link to this HTML file, and the style, it's a link to this one. Okay, we're not going to have any logic just yet, but I want to modify this HTML. So I want to copy paste in a real navigation. So this is a nav, like the ones you see in Bootstrap. Actually, it's a Bootstrap navigation that I've just copy pasted in here, and we have two links, notes and feedback, and we also have the noted logo. Okay, but it's pure Bootstrap. Don't worry about this. It's just HTML with some Bootstrap classes. Okay, and now we have our navigation component, and let's insert it into our page. So we'll go back to the app component. Okay, we're going to create a div. I'm going to assign it a class of container. Again, container is just a Bootstrap class. And now, in order to insert my navigation menu here, I have to actually specify the name of my component. So app navigation. And that's it, basically. So now the app component has a shell component called app navigation. Let's fire up the terminal. Okay, I'll hit ng-serve and see if we have the desired outcome. Now, this is just a very, very, very simple component. It has no logic, it doesn't have any styles, but it kind of teaches you the basics of how Angular components interact and how everything in Angular is a component. But don't worry, we'll have more complex components coming shortly. Okay, so cool. So now we have our application, we have our upper bar. Of course, it doesn't do anything because we have no logic there, but we have a working component that's embedded in our root component. Cool. Now, in the next episode, we're going to take a look at routing. So when we click notes or feedback, our application will actually take us to those specific pages. Now, if you're wondering what those pages are, well, yep, they're just plain old components. Okay, but now I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay guys, hope you like this video, and I'll see you next time. Before we close, I would like to remind you to subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more software development tutorials that will sharpen your programming skills. Just go to the Romanian Coder YouTube page and click on the subscribe button. Also, if you found this video useful, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. If you have any comments, thoughts, or ideas for new courses, just put them in the comment section at the end of this video, because I would love to get feedback from you guys. You can also find me on Twitter at RomanianCoder, and you can also check out my blog www.romaniancoder.com. Until next time, have a great day and write amazing code. Goodbye.